You've felt it even when nobody names it out loud. That subtle shift in the air when you refuse to play the usual games. You don't chase anyone, you don't beg for inclusion, you don't contort yourself to fit the moment, and suddenly that makes you dangerous in their eyes. People call you distant, cold, arrogant. Maybe that is just their word for free. The uncomfortable truth is that most folks don't want to admit how uneasy they feel around someone who needs nothing from them. A man who can walk away without a second glance, who doesn't stretch a smile just to be liked, who never argues just to prove he's right, who doesn't post just to be noticed, shakes something loose in them. It isn't because he's cruel or thinks he's superior. His calm simply exposes something raw inside others. The addiction to approval, the fear of being alone, the frantic need to be chosen. Most people grow up living like hostages, bound by opinions, trends, and the invisible leash of validation. Then there is the man who doesn't need your praise or permission. When approval can't control someone, most begin to worry about what else they can't control. He's not trying to prove anything. He's simply unmoved and unbothered. And in a world built on constant performance, his stillness looks like a threat. So they label him antisocial, detached, emotionally unavailable. But as Nietzsche pointed out, the truly dangerous man is the one who creates his own values instead of inheriting everyone else's. Once a man defines himself, he can't be manipulated. When he learns to find peace in his own company, he becomes untouchable. A man who does not need you cannot be owned. Our culture whispers that being alone is dangerous, not in the physical sense but emotionally. Every ad, every social post, every late-night doubt repeats the same refrain. You must be surrounded, you must be adored, you must be liked or something is wrong with you. What if that is the very first lie? What society fears most is not your loneliness but your emotional self-sufficiency. Somebody who doesn't crave a steady drip of affirmation, who can sit in absolute silence and feel whole, is someone the system cannot steer. Loneliness can be monetized. If you feel empty, you buy more, stream more, scroll more, chase connections like oxygen. Every algorithm keeps you hungry so you never leave the table. But solitude, genuine sovereign solitude, threatens the entire structure. The man who doesn't thirst for attention won't click the ad. The one who isn't desperate to be loved doesn't mind the quiet. The man who finds peace without performance refuses to obey the call to consume. Capitalism doesn't only sell products. It sells validation. Instagram sells beauty, LinkedIn sells status, TikTok sells attention, and every sale reminds you that you are not enough until you belong and receive approval. Yet the man who walks alone, who smiles at nothing in particular, who thinks deeply and speaks sparingly, breaks the economy of insecurity. He is a glitch in the code, and glitches get branded. They call him distant, detached, even dangerous because he slipped out of the loop. Carl Jung spoke about this long before social media. He didn't view neediness as weakness but as a sign that the psyche has not individuated. The person who hasn't separated from the collective needs the world to describe them. Start individuating, face your shadow, sit in your silence, reclaim the bits of energy scattered across people and screens, and you begin to stand on your own. Once you stand alone, you stop being programmable. You stop chasing what others chase. Stop playing roles to feel accepted. Stop needing noise to feel alive. That makes you unreadable to systems built on predictability. You don't vote the way they expect, you don't buy what they push, you don't follow their fears. You're not lonely or broken. You're simply no longer for sale. In a culture designed for control, independence is pathologized, not celebrated. They don't want you healed because a healed person walks away and leaves nothing for them to sell. Perhaps your craving for others was never truly about love but survival. The need to fit in, to belong, to stay alive through acceptance. That impulse may have begun as instinct, yet society turned it into conditioning. Breaking free from that conditioning is a form of rebellion. Carl Jung named the path individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole self, not the self that culture, religion, parents, or peers molded, but the self beneath all that. Individuation isn't self-improvement. It is self-confrontation. It requires facing the parts you buried, the rage suppressed, the needs silenced, the voice replaced with obedience. It means peeling back the identity tailored for you and asking, Who was I before the world told me what to be? Most people don't want wholeness. They want acceptance. Belonging often demands sacrificing the very parts that make you real. Jung reminded us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but no one mentions the cost. The willingness to stand alone. Nietzsche carried this further. He introduced the Übermensch, the one who rises above the herd, who builds new values through will, pain, and solitude. The individual has always had to fight not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. Attempt it and you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high for owning yourself. Many people aren't living their own lives. They follow a blueprint they never questioned, think what their group thinks, desire what others desire, judge what others judge, and call that morality. Real morality, the kind Nietzsche admired, isn't obedient. It is creative, and creativity is dangerous to any system of imitation. Jung's shadow and Nietzsche's herd speak to the same trap. A divided self performing for others. Imagine the man who escapes. He integrates his shadow, the ugly, chaotic truths within, instead of hiding them. He no longer lives to meet expectations but to embody his own truth. He is misunderstood and sometimes feared because authenticity disrupts comfort. That kind of man threatens structures built on imitation. He isn't simply alone or independent. He is in psychic rebellion. He has declared war on the parts of himself that once begged for acceptance, and in burning those, he was reborn. That is why solitude isn't mere peace. It is fire, a furnace where the false self dies and the real one rises. They never had to chain you. They convinced you that freedom felt like attention. They handed you a scrolling feed, a digital applause machine, and you stepped in willingly. Social media isn't just a tool. It is a drug, and the high is validation. Every like is a tiny hit of approval. Every follower a whisper that you matter. Every notification a reminder that you still exist for others. So you keep posting and curating and performing until silence itself feels like death. Because somewhere along the line your worth got tied to your visibility. They made you afraid of being invisible, of being alone, of being forgotten. That fear was never yours. It was planted, engineered, and monetized. Consumerism doesn't only move products. It sells identities. Wear this to feel confident, buy that to feel powerful, drive this and people will respect you. You think you are choosing but you are compensating, not expressing freedom but patching a hollow planted on purpose. An insecure mind is the perfect customer. You can't market wholeness, but you can package insecurity and its remedy. Dating has become swipe culture. Those apps were never designed for connection. They were designed to keep you swiping, reduce desire to algorithms, turn intimacy into a numbers game. Every match pulls a lever, every rejection pushes a button, until self-worth becomes just another metric to optimize with filters and strategies. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious will rule your life and you will call it fate. Here, fate is a script written by someone else, and you perform without knowing. The moment you unplug, even briefly, something shifts. When you stop checking, swiping, posting, reacting, you start observing. You see how predictable the feed has become, how manipulated your wants are, how much of your life was coded by unseen hands. Awareness places you outside the program, and that is why solitude is feared. Not because it is lonely but because it is liberating. A man who sits comfortably in silence, who needs no likes or attention, is no longer part of the machine. Ads lose power, peer pressure slides off, trends lose shine. They say such a man is dangerous, but it is not his voice that threatens. It is the fact that he no longer needs to shout. He does not require your praise or dread your rejection. He simply is, and that naked existence unmoved by applause or criticism is what unsettles a controlled world. What really makes him dangerous is that he's mastered something most people run from, radical self-honesty. While others lie to themselves day after day, telling convenient stories about their relationships, their beliefs, their pain, he looks directly into the mirror no one else wants to face. He doesn't distract himself with toxic positivity or bury himself in endless activity. He asks the questions that tear the illusions apart. What am I pretending not to know? Whose dream am I living? What part of me am I still hiding from? And then he answers. He answers honestly without flinching. That's not self-help. That's self-discipline. That's soul auditing. You can't build a real life on half-truths and curated performances. You have to be willing to lose the life built on lies to find the one grounded in truth. He might walk away from a long-term relationship. Not because it's broken, not because it's abusive, but because it's no longer honest. It's no longer alive. Most people stay. They stay out of fear, out of habit, out of comfort. He leaves not in anger, but in integrity. Because to him, living a false life is worse than being alone. Carl Jung believed that you must become your own teacher, your own disciplinarian, your own judge. There's no other way. You either take full ownership of your mind or someone else will rent it for their agenda. That's what emotional sovereignty really means. Most people chase love to feel whole, chase attention to feel alive, chase approval to feel like they matter. The dangerous man doesn't chase. He doesn't beg to be desired. He doesn't contort himself to fit into someone's mold. He doesn't sell out his values just to sit at the table. He has already become his own source. And because of that, he can walk away from rejection without collapsing. When someone ignores him, ghosts him, misunderstands him, he doesn't spiral. He doesn't crumble. He knows rejection isn't death. It's data. It's feedback. It's not personal. It's a mirror. And that makes him immune to emotional blackmail. He cannot be guilt, flattered, or manipulated into betraying himself. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." That's what we're talking about here. Obeying yourself not from impulse or ego, but from principle. Emotional independence isn't about building a wall. It's about building a foundation. The kind of foundation that can hold steady even when everything else is crumbling. And then there's cognitive autonomy, the rare ability to think clearly, independently, without inherited filters. Most people carry beliefs they never chose. Ideas passed down like furniture, never questioned, never examined. They wear morality like a hand-me-down coat and call it virtue. The dangerous man doesn't do that. He questions everything. He takes his values apart, piece by piece, and puts them back together only if they belong to him. He sharpens his principles through thought, through contradiction, through discomfort, until what remains is solid, real, and earned. He might leave a religion, not with bitterness, not with rebellion, just quiet clarity. This was never mine. That kind of act isn't about walking away from faith. It's about walking toward ownership. If your beliefs aren't yours, then your life isn't either. And that's not living. That's performing. Nietzsche wrote, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." He meant it. Ownership isn't free. You have to earn it through courage, through questions, through solitude. Then there's the shadow. Everyone has one. But most people pretend they don't. They repress it, deny it, project it onto others. The dangerous man? He goes straight into the cave. He sits with his shame, his grief, his rage. He doesn't judge it. He studies it. He walks through it. Not to become dark, but to become whole. Because he understands the truth Jung gave us. What you suppress controls you. What you confront transforms you. That's why he doesn't explode during arguments. Not because he's passive, not because he's detached, but because he already dealt with the storm inside. He buried the pain. He faced the ghost. He walked through the fire most people avoid. And now he doesn't have to prove anything. He doesn't need the last word. He's not fighting to be right. He already made peace with the part of him that once felt unseen. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's what shadow work really is. Not journaling, not affirmation, confrontation. Ask yourself, what part of you have you exiled? What emotion are you most afraid of feeling? What memory are you still organizing your life around in silence? That's where your power lives, in the place you're scared to look. These 4 traits, radical honesty, emotional sovereignty, cognitive autonomy, and shadow mastery, they're not personality types. They're battle scars. They're the outcome of doing the work nobody else wants to do, of sitting alone when it's uncomfortable, of facing the silence that used to feel like death, of choosing truth even when it costs everything. And the more a man embodies these, the less reactive he becomes. He's not obedient. He's not desperate. He's not clinging to anything. That kind of man is free. That's why they call him dangerous. Not because he threatens, but because he can't be threatened. He doesn't care if you misunderstand him. He doesn't need your approval. He doesn't beg to be liked. So he becomes a mirror. And people don't like mirrors, not the honest ones. Because the moment they see someone living without performance, they start to notice how much of their own life still is. They say they admire solitude until you actually choose it, until you stop playing the game, until you begin walking away from the noise and the people who only knew how to love the version of you that needed them. And that's where the real cost of freedom shows up. It costs the illusion of belonging. It costs the comfort of being understood. It costs your seat at the table if that table was built on pretending. But in exchange, it gives you something they can't offer. Clarity. You start seeing who actually values you and who just needed you needy. Power. The kind of internal power that can't be taken because it wasn't borrowed. And peace. Not the silence of isolation, but the silence of no longer performing. You stop proving. You stop shrinking. You stop adjusting your edges just to be held by hands that can't hold your truth. And what's left? What's left is real. It's you. And it's free. This is why the dangerous man walks alone. Not because he wants distance for the sake of it, not because he's cold or unfeeling, but because he refuses to trade his integrity for inclusion. He would rather be misunderstood in truth than loved in illusion. And in that choice, he becomes untouchable. Not invincible. Not emotionless, just so deeply rooted in who he is that no one else gets to decide his value again. That's the price of freedom, and also its greatest gift. While the world trades itself away for approval, he becomes something rare, a man who belongs completely to himself. They won't admit it out loud, not in words, but deep down they fear him. Not because he's aggressive or loud, but because he's free. Free from the systems that keep everyone else in line. Free from the lies they've all silently agreed to believe. He doesn't need to shout. He doesn't start movements. He doesn't wave flags. He simply lives, and that alone is a disruption. He's an economic threat. In a world built on insecurity, the most valuable customer is the one who feels incomplete. Someone who needs a new look to feel confident. Someone who needs a new car to feel powerful. Someone who needs luxury to feel worthy. But the dangerous man no longer chases dopamine. He doesn't scroll to soothe himself. He doesn't click just to feel something. And because he's stopped needing what they sell, the ads don't work on him. The sales don't seduce him. The trends don't touch him. He's a broken customer. And that breaks the cycle. He's a political threat too. He doesn't buy into the outrage, doesn't bow to slogans, doesn't react on cue. You can't push him into a camp because he questions the entire map. He doesn't belong to a tribe, and you can't bribe him with identity. He sees the system. He reflects on it. He dissects it. He doesn't vote the way you want, and when necessary, he stands alone. And that scares the system because it doesn't know how to handle someone who sees through the theater and still doesn't flinch. But the biggest threat he poses is psychological. Because without saying a word, his presence alone becomes a disruption. He's a mirror, held too steadily, too honestly, for others to look away. When you meet someone who doesn't need anything from you, who doesn't try to impress or seek praise, it becomes clear just how much of your own identity is performance. And that's uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable, because it forces people to confront how much they've given up just to belong. They call him dangerous, distant, cold, detached. Not because of what he is, but because of what he reveals. They label his self-possession as arrogance. They pathologize his independence as avoidance. They mock his clarity as if it's a phase. Because if they admitted what he truly is, a man who cannot be bought, swayed, or seduced, they'd have to face what they've become. And most would rather demonize what they don't understand than evolve into what they secretly admire. This kind of man doesn't just happen. He isn't born this way. He's built, formed in silence, forged in discomfort, shaped by choices that most people never make. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't live for applause. He doesn't seek out the spotlight. If you want to become him, you can. But it starts with truth. Every night, sit alone. No music, no scrolling. Just a pen, a page, and your full, unfiltered honesty. Ask yourself, what did I want today that I didn't actually need? Where did I lie just to fit in? What fear shaped my choices? Marcus Aurelius did this every day. Not for content, not for likes, but as a ritual, a form of psychological hygiene. He knew that if you don't regularly face yourself, you become a stranger to yourself. And this isn't about journaling. It's about confrontation. You want to be free? Then meet the parts of yourself you've buried. The anger, the envy, the weakness. Sit with it. Stare at it. Ask yourself, what do I hate in others that still lives in me? What part of me am I scared they'll discover? What pieces of my identity are still owned by culture, by trauma, by fear? That's shadow work. And it hurts. But until you face your shadow, you are ruled by it. Take time away from the noise. Log out. Delete the apps. Not forever, just long enough to remember what silence feels like. Because if your worth rises and falls with likes, with comments, with engagement, you're still owned. Start small. 1 hour a day with no stimulation. Stretch it longer. Go for a walk without music. Sit alone without distraction. Let your nervous system relearn something it's forgotten. Stillness is not a threat. Stillness is a test. Most people never pass that test. They keep borrowing beliefs, repeating slogans, wearing values like clothes they never chose. But you don't have to. You can ask, what would I believe if no one told me what was right? What does integrity look like when no one's watching? Who am I when the applause stops? Write your own code. Etch it into your decisions. And be willing to be exiled for it. That's not rebellion. That's sovereignty. Becoming this man isn't a weekend project. It's not a style. It's not an aesthetic. It's a complete dismantling. A tearing down of illusions, of conditioning, of every soft cage that taught you to stay small, agreeable, and dependent. But once you begin, something shifts. Something permanent. You stop being part of the audience. You become the author. Here's the paradox no one talks about. When you stop chasing people, they notice you. When you stop needing to be chosen, you become magnetic. When you stop reaching for anyone, everyone starts to feel your presence. That's the power of the man who doesn't flinch in silence, who radiates certainty without saying a word. He isn't charming. He isn't trying. He just is. And that's rare. People are drawn to groundedness, to stillness, to that deep, steady energy that doesn't reach, doesn't grasp, doesn't beg. It doesn't come from charisma. It comes from integration. Carl Jung understood this. He knew that once a man meets his shadow, once he brings both his light and darkness into alignment, he becomes a mirror. And real mirrors never flatter. They just reflect. That's why people either gravitate to him or run from him. He stirs something inside them, something they lost or never had. The integrated man is a threat not because he attacks, but because he reveals. When you're near someone who doesn't need you, who doesn't twist himself to be accepted, you start to notice all the ways you still do. And that's where the revolution starts. Not in noise, not in arguments, in presence, in silence, in the quiet knowing that speaks louder than any performance. And this is the truth they never told you. The man who no longer needs anything starts to have everything. Not because he grabs at life, but because life flows toward the man who doesn't cling. So no, solitude is not weakness. It's not a punishment. It's not some problem to be solved. It's power. It's the birthplace of clarity. It's the fire where the false self burns away. And the man who doesn't run from it, who doesn't fill every quiet space with noise or distraction, becomes something rare. He becomes free. And freedom, in a world addicted to control, is a revolution all by itself.